Is Spider-Man's time in the MCU finite? That is the big question coming out of CinemaCon 2017, where Amy Pascal, who is a producer on the Spider-Man movies, she used to be the head honcho over at Sony, made a comment essentially saying there might never be a deal like the Marvel-Sony deal over Spider-Man after Homecoming 2 when this one comes to an end. That led a lot of people to wonder, does this mean that you guys aren't interested in re-upping this contract? Jim, let's break this down. What is Spider-Man's future in the MCU looking like? What do you think it will take for these two companies to renegotiate this contract?
Well, okay. First of all, let me just quickly read exactly what she did say so that people, so it's not taken out of context. Quote, one of the things that I think is so amazing about this experience is that you don't have studios deciding to work together to make a film very often. In fact, it may never happen again after we do the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming. So
we should say that was the initial deal with Marvel, was that this would only last through the sequel. That's not really changing anything.
They extended that deal too. That first deal was February 2015. And in that time, they've extended it so that Tom Holland's Spidey could show up in Avengers Infinity War. Tom Holland's contract basically is 3 franchise movies and 3 solo Spider-Man movies. So basically 3 for the Marvel, 3 for Sony. So what's the point here? I think the point is to remember that the rights to Spider-Man didn't go back to Marvel.
In this
People
deal.
keep saying that that's not what happened. They're sharing the character. They had an agreement to share Spider-Man, but ultimately Sony has complete authority over the character's appearance on screen. Marvel has taken some creative control and creative lead on Spider-Man, but in order for this deal to work, I don't think it's going to be the sort of arrangement they had for the first one, which was essentially free. Marvel wasn't going to make money off Spider-Man Homecoming, and Sony's not going to make money off Civil War and Infinity War. Marvel controls the merchandising rights. So what I think is going to happen is Marvel's going to have to pay now. There's
going to have to be some sort of deal where Sony makes money off Spider-Man appearing in MCU movies, essentially.
Because they have the timing of this, going back over the timeline of when this deal was made just weeks, literally weeks before Amy Pascal's replacement as the chairman of Sony Pictures was brought in, a guy named Tom Rothman, who Kevin Feige from Marvel knows from his days of 20th Century Fox and X-Men.
This is a little inside baseball for you all.
But Sony now has a new boss, so probably a new deal, and Tom Rothman will probably drive a hard bargain. Like, you really want Spider-Man, you're going to have to make it worth our while. Now that the character has been kind of rehabilitated, if you will.
I think what also remains to be seen is just how much of a money driver Spider-Man is for Marvel and for Sony. I mean, we're talking about 2019 when Homecoming 2, or whatever the Spider-Man sequel is called, is supposed to come out. Marvel only has Phase 3 planned out through 2020 anyway. So we're probably going to be getting some of those plans. They'll be figuring out what they want for Phase 4 as Infinity War is currently shooting now. Homecoming hasn't come out yet. We haven't seen how Spider-Man plays into Infinity War. It seems like he's going to be a big part of it. And also we know that Sony is working on a Venom movie, and they're working on these other other sort of Spider-Man spin-off movies. And I think if it will remain to be seen if the only thing that helps these Spider-Man movies generate money is their attachment to the MCU, then they're really going to have to... I mean, they're already so attached to it from Spider-Man's introduction in Civil War, basically an Avengers movie, and then Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark being Spider-Man's mentor in this movie. But I think that if those movies do really well and projects like Venom sort of die on the vine, then we'll see Sony really have to figure out what their priority is moving
what
forward.
What kind of leverage will they have? Because, I mean, Sony will have more leverage if, let's say, Venom turns into, for Sony, what Deadpool turned into Fox.
Right, that's
for
the
Fox,
other alternative.
Where, okay, now Venom is this big money maker. And
the sort of the Spider-Man cinematic universe can stand on its own then.
Yeah, exactly. Then Marvel might really want Spider-Man and be willing, I mean, they obviously want Spider-Man, but be willing to pay a prettier penny for it than they might otherwise. It all depends on how many cards you're holding at the negotiating table.
And yeah, I think that how the success of those movies pans out shows which of these two studios will have the upper hand.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't envision a world in which Spider-Man never appears in the MCU after 2019.
I think they'll make a deal.
And you know, both studios sort of shot themselves in the foot with this because the fact that Spider-Man is so embedded in the MCU now makes it really hard to take him out of it, like across the board. You're going to get to that point with wherever the MCU goes after Infinity War and after 2020 that people are like, well, why can't you just call Spider-Man, which they've already run into with the Netflix shows, with S.H.I.E.L.D., and you know, with some of these other standalone movies where not all Avengers pop in.
Yeah.
And I think to just say, oh, well, you know, we launched Spider-Man and we're not putting him in anymore, it doesn't really make sense.
It's a tough thing to sell to the general public, you know.
Right.
It's like, it's also too now, Spider-Man and so many of the Marvel movies in general have become team-up films. You know, it's like Marvel Team Up, the old comic. You know, to suddenly now have Spidey and not have his amazing friends, pun intended, kind of showing up, it would be, it's kind of a bummer as an audience. You're on one hand, you're telling us shared universe, and then the other hand, maybe not anymore. So I think they'll make a deal. It really comes down to how much is Marvel willing to pay. If they pay, though, will they ask for even more creative control? Like, so what will Sony have to give up in the meantime? Or does Sony just want a chunk of the merchandising rights? But now you're getting into real, like, that's Disney's bread and butter, and that's good luck negotiating.
And it's interesting going back to what Amy Pascal said about, you know, we might never see a deal like this again. You know, after the Spider-Man and Marvel dream came true, everyone started saying, well, what if the X-Men came back to Marvel, which goodness knows we're many years away, but I am interested to see if this Sony Marvel deal does end up being a full success, and we haven't seen really how successful it will be until we get Homecoming coming out and everything after that. Maybe this will set a precedent for more deals along these lines, which could be really fun and interesting.
Very interesting days ahead, but again, this is long term. We're talking about, we might not know whether or not a deal has been struck until 2019.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they can just bide their time and see how the studio's fortunes pan out, you know?
But for now, we're saying Spidey's future with the MCU seems pretty set. Even if, you know, this contract is different after 2019, we still expect him to be appearing in the MCU. We want to know from you guys, though, what do you hope Spider-Man's future with the MCU is? Would you like to see him continue to be an integral part of the Avengers, or would you be more interested in a Spidey cinematic universe developed by Sony? Let us know in the comments below, and for all things Marvel, keep it here at IGN.